You mateys, welcome back to another Robbie C Gaming YouTube video. Today we're diving into Disney Lorcana and we're talking about Green Steel Pirates. If you guys have been following the content here on the channel, we deviated for a little bit and threw out some more competitive options and decks and things of that nature. But I wanted to come back to what I feel like and am passionate about, and that is bringing you guys affordable decks, fun vibe to play that maybe you can take out if you want to be competitive with friends, or if you want to go crazy and try to, master these decks and take them to some bigger events. And Green Steel Pirates is no different. When I first looked at making tribal decks or themed decks, Brooms is the first place you go, and we do have a Brooms deck if you guys want to see what our Brooms deck looks like. Although, spoiler alert, it hasn't literally gotten basically any new tools in my mind since like set 4. Pirates was one of the first things I locked in on, being a massive Captain Hook fan myself. Actually, like this big of a Captain Hook fan. So I guess it's like part of my nature. Set 6, we got a couple really fantastic pirate options, and we realized in set 7 that they were really trying to push the narrative of Green Steel Pirates. And I think there's a couple different ways that you can sort of tech this deck. I know personally my friend Jaden has built this version of a deck to have the more action-focused theme and leaning on a lot more set 7 cards. I love the location style though, and that's exactly what we have here today. It's Green Steel Location Pirates. We have 41 characters, and of those 41, there are only 4 that are not pirates. And the reason that we don't have pirates filling those 4 slots is just simply because we need a draw engine, and Doc is certainly going to fill that slot. Now, what's really cool about this deck is that I think that it has some challenging aspects to it, but it also creates this world where the pirates are working together to sort of get to 3 major pirates that are your bosses, and those bosses sort of determine how the deck plays out. I think the best decks in Lorcana have a variety of lines that end up working for them, and depending on which of the big 3 pirates you end up seeing could really have an effect on how your game's going to play out, even though they actually all work together with each other pretty seamlessly as well. Coming in first, we have Pete the Space Pirate. His frightful voice is really what opponents fear. When he is exerted sideways, your opponent can't use their characters to sing songs, which is absolutely huge for stopping momentum, as one of the easiest ways to get sort of a tempo advantage is to have characters sing songs, because then it doesn't cost them any ink. The other beautiful part that really creates a nice protection umbrella for the rest of our deck is that when he is exerted sideways, your pirate characters gain resist 1, which means that they are incredibly difficult to take out via challenges, and we're trying to sort of flood the board with a bunch of characters that our opponent has to answer. Another beautiful part is that Pete the Space Pirate's frightful voice stacks. So if you have multiple Petes on the board and they're exerted, well, it's going to allow you to have even more resist. Moving next down the line is the lovely lady, and that is Daisy Duck Pirate Captain. It's one of my favorite arts from set 6, and she is a pretty neat 4-cost 3/3 that has the ability Distant Shores. Whenever one of your pirate characters quests while at a location, draw a card. Because we have a lot of pirates and we do have a lot of locations, she's going to serve as a fantastic draw engine that we can sort of bring out as we've established the board, and maybe they're not too threatened by the fact that our pirates are at locations until she gets played. Even though she's not able to quest herself or do anything because she was just played, our other characters can immediately start triggering her effect, which takes us to probably the most difficult to remove character on the board, and that is John Silver, the Greedy Treasure Seeker. Every location that you have in play, John Silver is going to get 1 resist, which makes him, like we said, harder to deal with, but he also quests for 1 additional lore. So while people are looking at our locations that continue to grow and continue to exist, can sort of feel like, hey, no, it's fine. It's fine. I don't have to be too afraid of that. Well, surprise, when John Silver comes down, he immediately requires them to answer either him, or they're going to start wasting time by trying to bash all of your locations so that John Silver becomes less effective. And when they're focused on taking out your locations, it allows your pirates to shine. Takes me back to Pirates of the Caribbean in the first one. Armada arrives and they're trying to handle everything on the island, and then the pirates are like sneaking under the water in that really cool scene. That's kind of what we're doing with our locations. Now, this deck is essentially playing around a really solid curve. 10 1-drop cards, you have 19 2-drop cards, and you have 21 3-drops. So let's talk about the 1-drop. I'm not going to include the locations because we'll get to that strategy near the end. We have 6 1-drop characters. We have Captain Hook, the forceful duelist, who comes in with Challenger 2. Another beautiful part about Captain Hook is that he is a captain, which is really going to play into our Mr. Smee that we see on turn 2. The other we have is Pete, Pirate Scoundrel. Now, some people are going to say that this is a weird inclusion to have in the deck because his ability, Pilfer and Plunder, whenever you play an action that isn't a song, you may banish chosen item. We don't have any songs in the deck, and we only have 4 actions. So why do we have this character? Honestly, we have him for 2 reasons. One, he's an additional 1-drop so that we can have a character on the board, and he is a pirate, which is going to be buffed by all of our other pirate opportunities. But second, his greatest ability is that he is a shift target for Big Pete. This is a very unsuspecting character who a lot of people just aren't too concerned about. He's a 1/2. He only quests for 1. He doesn't have a challenger. He's not doing a whole lot. And so on turns where you're able to play him, on turn 4, you can shift in a Pete Space Pirate pretty fast because lots of times people are going to focus their removal on our Captain Hook, focus our removal on Mr. Smee. Always plays into our favor when Pete Pirate Scoundrel ends up sticking on the board. Moving into our 2-drops, we have Mr. Smees. We have 7 Mr. Smees in the deck, which are the Bumbling Mate you know and love. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted and you don't have a captain character in play, deal 1 damage to this character. Now, we have quite a few captains actually in the deck. We have 16 different captains inside of this deck, which is pretty awesome. Allows us to really lean into Mr. Smee not taking damage, and also Pete Space Pirate is exerted sideways. All of our pirates get 1 resist, which would include Mr. Smee as well. So realistically, we have 20 of our 41 characters help Mr. Smee not take that additional damage. Now, our second Mr. Smee, the Steadfast Mate, is our evasive answer. This deck does struggle with evasives. I'm just going to go ahead and call that out there. In the current world of Ruby Amethyst really leaning into the evasive strategy, we can have a hard time dealing with evasives. So I want to just make that aware if you're looking at a larger competitive environment. Our last 2-drop is going to be Doc the Bold Knight. When you play this character, you discard your hand to draw 2. Ideally, we're going to empty our hand to get down to Doc being one of the last cards we play. We play him, we get a little more gas in the tank so that we can keep the aggro engine going. Moving into our 3-drops, we have 4 different 3-drops, and we're running 4 of each of them. The first is going to be Captain Hook Underhanded, who is another character that ends up being our sort of extra draw engine. Not usually getting us a ton, but he does get us some. If we end up playing against Steel, a lot of Steel decks are going to run Mr. Smee. Captain Hook's turn sideways. Well, congratulations. Those Mr. Smees cannot quest. Definitely comes up more often than you would think it would. And he quests for 2. So we're just going to keep turning him sideways in order to find that push. Now, next up is Donald Duck, our first mate. While you have a captain character in play, this character gets +2 lore, which is fantastic. It means he's questing for 3. And like we already talked about, we have 16 different captains inside of the deck. This is huge for us. In a world that we can get a Donald Duck on a location and get him questing while we have a Daisy Duck out, we're drawing a lot of cards. She is a captain, so she enables that captain on deck ability. Gaining lore, we're drawing cards. It's a beautiful time. Next, we have Billy Bones, the Space Sailor. It's another way that we can sort of deal with some pesky stuff, and it's whenever it's banished. So worst case scenario, he's a 2/2. We can run him into something else, and when he is banished, even if we initiate the challenge, we still get to banish a chosen item or location. So we have even more item removal, location removal, in case they play a big McDuck Manor or something like that. Even better, he quests for 2. And then last but certainly not least is that John Silver that we already discussed. So you've seen the other characters rounding it out. Let's talk about another couple of key actions. One is our only action, which is Baboom. Deal 2 damage to chosen character or location. Is inkable, which is fantastic. We don't have to worry about uninkables in this deck. We only are running 6 uninkable cards. And so because of that, it allows us a lot of freedom, and we can mulligan pretty aggressively because we're not very often going to end up with a dead hand where we can't just be inking and sort of working our way up. Even though our draw engines are not necessarily the most massive, we know we're going to get to those higher ink counts to at least be able to play the Pete at 6 ink, which also balances out the rest of the deck pretty evenly. When we get to 6 ink, we rarely need to move beyond that. But Baboom is our spot removal that we have in case we aren't able to challenge in with our bigger characters. I'm really excited about the 15 cards that sort of round out this core in our location location focus. So let's start with the item Map of Treasure Planet. It's a 3-cost inkable item that when you play it, I guarantee you if you're playing this at locals, the people across from you are going to have to ask to see this card because it just doesn't get seen a whole lot because people don't really lean on locations. But what's really great is you can exert this item to pay 1 less for the next location you play this turn, which means that you can get a free Hidden Cove out. Really big momentum plays happening. But the other beautiful part is that you pay 1 less to move characters to a location. This is big because the maps do stack. So in any game that you're able to get both maps of your treasure planet out, if your opponent cannot remove them, we can move our characters into any of our locations for free, which is going to be really big when we get to Treasure Mountain, which is another card that I think people are not going to realize exists because it doesn't find its way into a ton of decks because it's uninkable. We're not worried about inkables here because we're pretty balanced. So let's talk about those locations. We have the Hidden Cove, which really buffs up each of those pirates. Like we said, we don't have a lot of removal, so we're going to have to be slamming into things with our pirate bodies. And so because of that, characters get +1 strength and willpower while here, which makes them just tougher to remove in general. Next up, we have the 7 Dwarves Mine. During your turn, the first time you move a character here, you may deal 1 damage to the chosen character. If it's a knight, deal 2 instead, which Doc is the only knight that we have in the deck, sadly. So that's a little tough for us. We only get the 1 damage ping most of the time. But another beautiful part about 7 Dwarves Mine is that it actually passively gains us a lore. That is big. Our remaining locations all gain us lore each turn, which helps push that clock forward even faster. Next is the Galactic Council Chamber. What's really unique about the Council Chamber is while you have an alien or robot character here, the location cannot be challenged. And you know who happens to be an alien character? John Silver, the Greedy Treasure Seeker, who gains a buff from each location that's in play. What's really cool about this is that if you end up with multiple John Silvers and multiple Council Chambers, you can literally put 1 John Silver at each of the Council Chambers, one of our locks that we end up with in the deck, so that we can have the opportunity to sort of keep our opponent from doing anything crazy. Another beautiful part about location decks is that when board wipes come, most of the time a board wipe comes at the expense of your characters. Very rarely does a board wipe affect locations. And when you have a lot of locations gaining you passive lore, it almost always puts your opponent in tight spots to want to use those sweepers and take you out because they know if they do that, they may not have the bodies on the board in order to deal with your locations. Biggest form of removal comes in a very sneaky card, and that is Treasure Mountain, the Azurite Sea Island. This was a card introduced in set 6 because it's a secret weapon, which is exactly what the passive of this location is. It costs 2 to move, but thankfully we have the Map of Treasure Planet that we're going to help reduce that cost. But at the start of your turn, deal damage to chosen character or location equal to the number of characters here. This is a 9 willpower location, which is the same thing that everyone's struggling to deal with in McDuck Manor. Also gains you 2 lore a turn, just like McDuck Manor. Understand the drawback here is that it is a 5 cost compared to a 4, and it's also 2 to move to the location. But what we get here is the opportunity to, if we load up Treasure Mountain, we can one-shot our opponent's characters at the start of their turn, especially if they have something developed. Now, I must include that this is not a May ability. At the start of your turn, deal damage to chosen character location equal to the number of characters here, which means if we end up sniping and really hitting a lot of characters at this location and we take out our opponent's board, the start of our turn, if our opponent has no characters and no locations for us to target, but we have characters at this location, we are going to have to hit our own stuff, just to keep in mind. Most often when I've been testing the deck, that rarely comes up. As per usual, let's do 2 mulligans, and then we are going to walk through the deck comparison chart. Let's see what we've got. We know that we have a really strong turn 2. We don't usually want to see the Map of Treasure Planet early on because it is one of our uninkables. We aren't going to need the dock refuel very early on, so we can go ahead and make sure that we send both of those cards off. And then it comes down to what style do we want to see. We don't have a 1-drop currently, so the more cards we send away, the better chance we have of finding our 1-drop. If we include the Hidden Cove, we have 10 of them in the deck. We've seen 7 cards here with none of them being that. I think most often what I would end up doing is I would keep the Smee. I'm probably going to keep the Baboom to answer an immediate threat or something that shows up. If I'm playing against a steel song, being able to baboom their singer on turn 2 can be really big, especially if I'm on the play. If I'm on the play or going first, then I'm definitely going to keep this. If I'm on the draw, this is a nice way to sort of get back in the game as well. So I'm going to hold on to this. Now our turn 2 is somewhat taken. So where would I look for turn 3? The hard part is the keeping Donald. If I don't see a captain, he's significantly less effective. If I go the 7 doors mine, I can start gaining some lore and some power, and this also would enable me to turn on for turn 3. So I probably actually would end up keeping the mine, and then I would send Captain Hook away. Maybe there's a world that I keep the Captain Hook, but I want, once again, the more cards I ship back, the more likely I am to find that 1-drop. So I think personally, this is where I would land on the mulligan. Draw 4 more. This is probably greedy, keeping the mine. I'm just going to go ahead and say, but I do think that getting that mine down and starting to gain the lore, people overlook that. Or it stalls them out to the point that they have to look at making or taking some bad trades per se. And I think that works out in our favor. So we are trying to gain lore as fast as possible. We don't really know in these hypotheticals who we're going against. All right, so we didn't end up finding one of the 1-drops, which is tough. We ended up with multiple copies of Billy Bones. So we would probably just ink a Billy Bones and pass. Draw into Captain Hook. Now we don't have any bodies established, but we know that we have a Captain Hook for turn 3. So here I would probably either ink one of my Daisy Ducks, or I would go about, because I know I have a turn 3, probably going to go ahead and ink my second Billy Bones here. I am going to play a Mr. Smee. What I like about this is that I can't turn him sideways. He's an immediate threat in lore, and we're going to be able to protect him with Captain on the next turn. So we draw into a Smee Steadfast Mate. Seems like an easy decision based on what board we would have in front of us. If we needed to eliminate or get rid of something, we have that opportunity, or we can send the Mr. Smee away. We only have 3 of these, so if I realize I'm not facing evasives, then I would probably go here. But if I do think that I'm facing something and I don't think that I'm going to need the spot removal, I'd probably ink the baboom. To be safe, we'd probably ink the Mr. Smee. Then we would probably exert 3, play our Captain Hook, and we would quest for 2 to get on the board. All right, so what would I do here? I think that the daisies afford me draw opportunity in the future, which means that I'm going to be more likely to draw into other options. So considering he's a little farther away, I think I actually end up inking the Pete here, and I would establish a 7 doors mine, and then I would either spend my remaining 2 ink to try to move one of them into a location, or to ping some damage, or I would spend the other 2 to baboom. Here, most likely what I'm going to do is I'm going to move Captain Hook into the location, ping the damage. Alrighty. What's fascinating here is that we don't have a lot of really fantastic lines available to us. We know once again that we're going to be sitting off the dock because we don't want to see the dock super early. We're probably going to keep the baboom because we need some form of a threat, but we know that we're extremely well balanced. The hard part here is that if we send away the Pete and we find a 1-drop Pete, then this becomes really bad. But I do think that having 3s and 4s and 6s is pretty aggressive. So I think here would actually send 6 and just keep the 1 singular baboom. What do we end up finding? We end up finding both of our Petes. We knew that was going to happen. So play this out. We almost want to treat our 1-drop Petes as if they're uninkable because of the fact that they enable the shift. I think what I would go ahead and do here to start is, I think because we have a John Silver in hand and we don't currently have any 2-drops other than baboom, I think we would actually ink the Captain Hook, and we're going to end up playing one of our Pete's Pirate Scoundrels. Now on this next turn, okay, we draw into a 2-drop, which is pretty neat. What could we do here? We have a couple of options, but I think one of the ones that I'm going to look at is inking the baboom, playing a second Pete Pirate Scoundrel, and then playing a hidden cove so that we're developing threats, developing opportunity. The other option here is that I hold on to this and I spin the 2 to play the hidden cove and move the Pete inside of it. I think this is a really great strategy as well, so that if we end up shifting, he's already there. So let's stick with that line and just see how it feels. Draw, we end up drawing into a dock. So now we end up in some tough situations. I'm going to end up probably, based on the reason that we went with this line, I think that it makes sense to go ahead and ink the Galactic Council Chamber. Even though I talked about that being one of our locks that we really enjoy in the deck, what's great here is that we can choose to use that 3 ink. We can spend 2 to develop a second location, and then we can use that other to then play a 7 or play an additional Pete Pirate Scoundrel. And you can sort of see how this hand is developing here. This is really great for us. So we want to go ahead and we want to make sure that we are developing. Here would be a tough call because I want to keep inking. It's important to go ahead, and I like these cards. I don't want to send any of these locations away and ink these locations. So I think I would spend 3 to develop John Silver, and I actually wouldn't ink on this turn. What we can do here is we can ink a Billy Bones. We can spend 1 to develop a 3rd location. We can spend 2 to play a dock. We don't have any cards to discard, so we would just draw 2. We end up drawing into a Donald Duck as well as another location. Now, we wish we would have seen a 1-drop here because then we could have immediately played it, but that's fine. John Silver now is questing for 4 because of 1, 2, 3, and then his additional lore pip. He's questing for 4 and he has resist 3. This is huge for us. And on the 5th turn, let's see what we get. We end up with a Captain Hook. So how would we play this one out? We do have a captain on board, so we probably would ink the Captain Hook, and then we would spend 2, develop another 7 Dwarves Mine, as well as 3 Donald Duck. And now, if they didn't eliminate John Silver that turn, he's going to quest again, but this time he quests for 5. You can see how this sort of gets out of hand really fast, and that's with us only seeing the 1 dock. But that 1 dock hands us 2 cards to add more gas to the fire. We don't need to be the Amethyst decks that are just drawing a billion cards. We don't even need to be the discard green steel that's drawing a bunch of cards off of discarding your opponent. We need enough gas to keep ourselves happy and content moving forward. The location strategy is incredibly tough to deal with, and especially if they don't have the bodies developing and we are having our own pirates that can sort of swing back and answer. Rather troublesome for our opponents. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the chart. In the cost category, at the time of filming this is coming in $66. Now there are 2 cards inside of this deck that usually are going to be the most fluctuating. I would throw in a 3rd, but he doesn't ever really get too expensive. But those 3 cards are going to be the most expensive, being Doc the Bold Knight. This is that draw engine. The steel struggles to have consistent draw engines, which means that Doc's price when the steel meta is always going to go up. There was a time where I think he got up to $17 a piece. Prevalence of green steel also is going to include Pete the Space Pirate at the top as one of the first dual inks that was actually usable. Pete is really fantastic, and he is, I believe, a super rare, which means that he could be a little more pricey at the time. He's $250. Not terrible by any means, but to have a full playset of him is $10. So you're definitely going to want to watch your Pete's. He's an essential part of the deck. And then last but certainly not least is Smee the Bumbling Mate. Now Smee is an uncommon, so he shouldn't fluctuate that much, but he can definitely increase into the $3 and $4 range at times. Now is this tribal? Couldn't be more tribal. This is definitely going to slot in the family category for me. I think that some people are going to be like, hey, there's a Doc in there, so therefore it's not fully family. No, man. Doc's part of the family, because what Doc does is Doc really leans in and also connects with that mine location, which then ties into locations, which ties into John Silver. So he's part of the family. He's the weird uncle sitting in the corner. Is this competitive? This to me is probably the hardest one to slot in. I think depending on how competitive your local environments are, I think that this has legs and has the opportunity to surprise people at locals, it can be fast enough that it is definitely tricky for some people to answer. I know I had a week that I took an older version that was not as streamlined as this one is currently to my locals one week, and ended up I lost one match on the week. I think that it has the opportunity to do pretty well. I think that some of the upgrades worked out. If you find yourself playing in an aggro heavy meta, then you're maybe going to want to go with more of the action focused side of things. If it's a little more controlled style, the control styles, like I talked about with the sweeper sort of pushback, if they want to clear your board with sweepers, that our locations are gaining us lore and opportunity anyways. So could be really powerful in that room or that opportunity as well. I don't think that it's challenge leveled by any means, but I would put it on the higher side of computer, lower side of set champs. So I'm going to put it right on the line. Is this deck fun? I think it's super fun. I am not necessarily an aggro lover. I know we did Churnadogs, and I talked about how enjoyable that was because of the combos and things like that. I think what's really fun here is that you have this pirate sort of compounding aspect to it. So it's not just, oh, we're going to play some pirates and see how it goes. It's not just, oh, let's play some locations and see how it goes. I love that the two major aspects of the deck work together. It's pirates questing at locations, which allows us to draw cards off of Daisy, but also when we have locations, John Silver becomes a much more bigable, like a much larger threat. Really, really fun. I am going to slot this into the dopamine category. I think it is old trusty to a degree as well. You're going to find very much some reliability with this just because the lines that exist, the location line is really good on its own. Even if you don't hit all of your locations and you don't end up with the John Silver, the locations themselves can still end up like actually helping you quite a bit, as well as if you find yourself in the sort of just pirate questing side, that also works out really well for you as well. A lot of different lines that you can take, so it makes the deck very consistent as you're playing it, which is beyond old trusty. And I do think that you're going to have a lot of times where you look down at your board state and you're like, oh, a lot of cards out here right now, which is always fun. Definitely keeping in the dopamine category, but I would love to know your thoughts. What do you think about our green steel pirates? If you were to make some modifications, what modifications would you make to the deck? I know that this is the super tribal side of it. And if I decided to go outside of tribal, I would definitely include things like Pete Games Referee would fit really well into this because of the fact that it would just give another shift opportunity for big space pirate Pete. That would be a definite inclusion. I can see a Strength of the Raging Fire working it in, but that would blow it out of the budget category. Definitely some improvements that you can make if this is an archetype that you want to sit with. And I'll try to put a link to my friend Jaden's down below so that you have the action opportunity as well. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're going to leave you with the questing.